Well, hi and welcome. I am Chris. I'm the pastor of Compass. As always, I am really glad you're with me today. So, our world is built on spaces and places that people put together in order to make life work. Things like government, religion, communities, even our own internal thinking. These are all kingdoms that our world is built on. At their best, these kingdoms help us to function and thrive, but they can break down. And when that happens, things get weird. People get hurt. Jesus came announcing a new kind of kingdom. It was one that flips the script on power and identity and what it means to truly live. And in this message series we're in, we're looking at the clash between the way of Jesus and the systems that shape our world. And today we're going to talk about the kingdom of community. Now, community is basically a group of people who collectively have something in common, right? So common location creates cities and neighborhoods. Matching ideologies create political parties and churches. Matching interests create friend groups. After my daughter brought her husband, then her boyfriend, home for the first time, he told her, he says, "Your family is so loud." And we are. And whatever it is we're doing together, talking or listening to music, watching TV, we do it loudly. When my kids play video games, you can hear them screaming from the street outside our house. My Apple Watch regularly alerts me to the fact that the decibel level in my environment is high enough to affect my hearing. Families are communities that are bonded both by familial ties and by how loud you yell when you play Jackbox games. And whether it's a friend group of 3 or a society of 3 million, when people come together, it creates a community. At best, a community provides for everyone to have a place where they're accepted, included, and cared for. But that's not always how it works. We're walking through the final hours of Jesus' life in the Gospel of Matthew. And last week, we saw how Jesus was impacted by the corrupted kingdom of religion. And today we're going to look at how Peter was affected by corrupted community. So let's start in Matthew chapter 26, verse 57. It says, "Those who'd arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. Now Peter was sitting in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. 'You also are with Jesus of Galilee,' she said. But he denied it before them all. 'I don't know what you're talking about,' he said." Now, this is maybe for you a familiar story, the story of Peter's betrayal of Jesus. This may be common to you. You maybe heard it if you were growing up in church. When I was in youth group, I grew up in church. When I was in youth group as a teenager, this story was a cautionary tale about not being ashamed of Jesus. You don't want to be like Peter. So when your biology teacher talks about evolution, you need to tell her she's wrong and that the earth is only 5,000 years old. Or, when your friends want to watch an R-rated movie at a sleepover, you need to tell them, no, you're not going to do that because you're a Christian. And then you should call your mom and tell her to come get you. Or when your college philosophy professor tries to get you to sign a document that says God is dead, you refuse, and then you debate him in front of your whole class. And you do it so well that all the other students stand up one at a time and shout, "God's not dead." Well, that's actually the plot of a Christian movie called God's Not Dead, but you get the point. Peter is bad because he denied Jesus, and so we need to be good by loudly doing the opposite. But today I want to step out of that youth group approach. And rather than looking at how bad Peter is, I want to look at the community of people that were around him in this story. So let's continue in verse 71. "Then he went out to the gateway where another servant girl saw him, and she said to the people there, 'This fellow is with Jesus of Nazareth.' He denied it again with an oath, 'I don't know the man.' After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, 'Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away.' And then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, 'I don't know the man.' Immediately a rooster crowed, and then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. 'Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times.' And he went outside, and he wept bitterly." So in the high priest's courtyard, Peter was surrounded by people. the high priest's servants, the people who had been in the mob that had arrested Jesus, the high priest's guards. There was this community of people that Peter was a part of in that moment until someone recognized that he was different. And they said, he didn't help arrest Jesus. He was in Jesus's group, not ours. His accent even proves that he's from where Jesus is. And it became clearer that Peter was with Jesus and that he didn't belong in their community. And so Peter denied Jesus and fled. Again, a community is a human kingdom that when it's working will provide for the inclusion, acceptance, and care of everyone. And yet, it's easy to point to examples of the opposite. Communities that exclude people because of their race, sexual orientation, economic status, nation of origin, or even religious beliefs. Community at its best is a place where all people can be accepted, included, and cared for. But when community is corrupted, it doesn't offer acceptance. It demands conformity and compliance. It rejects people who don't submit to their system of values. Corrupted community is a vice that pressures people into its own image or pushes them out. And we can see that with Peter and his accusers. They're like, hey, are you one of us? I don't think this guy's one of us. Listen to his funny accent. He's not from here. I'm pretty sure he's with Jesus. This guy definitely is not one of us. In that moment, they were a community of people that demanded conformity and compliance from Peter. And he relented and he denied Jesus. Now, if we stop here, that's an interesting observation, but not much more. But what takes it a step further is something Peter wrote many years later to people who were facing those same community pressures he did. And as much as we could talk about Peter's denial of Jesus, I want to take a detour and I want to look at how Peter's experience may have guided the counsel that he gave to a church facing very similar circumstances. And so we're going to look at 1 Peter, and we're going to start in 1 Peter 4, 3-4. He says, you have had enough in the past of the evil things that godless people enjoy. Their immorality and lust, their feasting and drunkenness and wild parties, and their terrible worship of idols. Of course, your former friends are surprised when you no longer plunge into the flood of wild and destructive things they do. So they slander you. Peter wrote this to a church of people who were under intense pressure from the world that they'd come out of. They had stopped all of the pagan practices that informed daily life, and their former friends didn't like it. And so they started to pressure the church, slandering them, squeezing them. And to help them, Peter pointed them to a simple truth, that they are part of a new community. Look at 1 Peter 2, 9-10. But you are not like that, for you are a chosen people. You are royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession. As a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. Once you had no identity as a people. Now you are God's people. They are now a new community of God's people, a community chosen and called out by God with a whole new set of different values. And after reminding them of this fact that they are a different community, Peter begins to contrast their former broken community with the new Jesus-centered community that they're now part of. And in doing so, Peter shows us what we should aim for in building that same community for ourselves. So let's start by looking at 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. So the first contrast between human kingdoms of community and God's kingdom is the contrast of judgment versus love. The pagan community was harsh, critical, and judgmental towards the church. They slandered the church. They slandered what the church believed and how they lived. But Christians, our community should be one of love, where we are compassionate with each other, not demanding our own way, but working to find unity. So, when your choice is judgment or love, choose love. 1 Peter 3:9, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing. So our second contrast of communities is insult versus blessing. The pagan community mocked and insulted the church, but Peter said, don't do that. Don't retaliate. Our community should bless those who curse us, not repay evil for evil. Communities whose impulse is to mock, insult, or belittle people are corrupt. Full stop. Jesus-centered communities seek to bless people, to lift them up and honor them. And so when your choice is to insult or bless someone, choose blessing. 1 Peter 3:14 through 16. So don't worry or be afraid of their threats. Instead, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and respectful way. Keep your conscience clear. Then if people speak against you, they'll be ashamed when they see what a good life you live because you belong to Christ. Our third contrast between the kingdom of community is accusation versus respect. Broken community accuses and threatens those who don't conform or comply with their values. But true Christian community is always gentle and respectful. Followers of Jesus should never accuse, exploit, or manipulate anyone, particularly when it comes to sharing the gospel. And if the church finds itself on the side of those who would dominate, legislate, or control the actions and beliefs of others, you can be certain that church is a corrupted community and not modeled after Jesus. Because a Jesus-centered community is gentle and respectful. So when your choice is to accuse someone or respect them, choose respect. 1 Peter 4:10, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. Our fourth kingdom contrast is conformity versus diversity. The pagan community didn't like Christians because they didn't conform. In the ancient world, there were tons of gods, and you could worship whichever god you wanted to. But Christian worship was different. It was weird. They didn't conform to the patterns of the pagan world anymore. They broke down the structures that separated people and welcomed diversity in a way that was different than the pagan world. Christians were made up of men, women, rich people, poor people, slaves and masters, Gentiles and Jews. Each of these people had diverse gifts that were all recognized and welcomed in the church. Diversity is a Christian value, and it has been from the first days of Jesus' ministry. And when your choice is to prioritize conformity or diversity, choose diversity. 1 Peter 4:14 through 15. If you are insulted because you bear the name of Christ, you will be blessed, for the glorious Spirit of God rests upon you if you suffer. However, it must not be for murder, stealing, making trouble, or prying into people's affairs. Our final contrast is prying versus peace. Communities that pry into people's lives are broken. They get into people's business to control and coerce and manage others. But that's not how followers of Jesus are to live. Christians should mind their own business. You aren't the Holy Spirit. It's his job to nudge his way into people's lives and guide them to Jesus, not ours. Your job is to live at peace with everyone. Mind your own business. Let people live their lives and pray that they're transformed by Jesus. And so when your choice is prying or peace, choose peace. And just to wrap up, let me show you one single overarching thing that Peter wants the church to know about being a Jesus-centered community. A bunch of verses, but look at this in 1 Peter 2:12. He says, be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then, if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. The key to being a Jesus-centered community is to just live well. Peter said this over and over again in this letter. He said it in 1 Peter 2:12. Now look at 1 Peter 2:15 through 17. He says, it is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, yet you are God's slaves. So don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone and love the family of believers. He says it again in 1 Peter 3:1 through 2. He says, then, even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. He says it again in 1 Peter 3:16 through 17. Keep your conscience clear. He says, then if people speak against you, They will be ashamed when they see what a good life you live because you belong to Christ. According to Peter, the secret sauce to being a community that provides acceptance, inclusion, and care for everyone and works to lead people to Jesus is to just live a good life. And here's my personal translation, our point today. Don't be a jerk. Do you want to honor God? Don't be a jerk. Do you want to be part of a healthy and loving community? Don't be a jerk. Do you want to lead people into a transformative relationship with Jesus? Don't be a jerk. It's so simple. When people see our community, they should see love, blessing, respect, diversity, and peace. There's no place for judgment, insults, accusations, demands for conformity, and for prying into people's lives. Do you want to be a good Christian? Do you want to be part of a good church? Don't be a jerk. Live a life that so exemplifies the qualities of Jesus-centered community that it becomes irresistible to people, like Jesus was irresistible to people. So let's be a community of love, acceptance, inclusion, and joy. And let's do it by just not being jerks, living good lives, staying out of people's business, and loving them like Jesus does. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.